Chapter 1. The Day of the Sun. For Gloria, it was going to be one of those nights. Although the clock read 10 past 2, it felt much later. So she staggered into the kitchen in hopes of finding something to eat. Damn, no cake, no cookies, not even a piece of fresh fruit. Finally, after settling on rice crackers and peanut butter, she sat and stared into the night through her kitchen window. The motion sensor on her back deck kept cycling on and off, often doing that for no apparent reason except to shed light on her museum of unaccomplished backyard projects. There was the empty goldfinch bird feeder, the rusty garden shears, still sitting on the patio table since Easter, and her son Michael's muddy baseball pants hanging on the back of a deck chair. Yesterday was a challenging day. Scandalous stories of government corruption were popping all over like kernels in a movie theater. Then, a series of earthquakes started ripping a line across the Atlantic from Israel to the U.S., ending at Andrews Air Force Base in Maryland, where the man at the center of it all, Maximilian Cole, was being detained in a holding cell. The base was leveled. Shortly after, it was reported that he'd escaped. By 1 o'clock in the afternoon, he showed up at her front door in the relatively unaffected area of Spring Valley to give Gloria an exclusive interview. She spent almost 4 hours with him while the world around them tried to pick up the pieces from the massive earthquake. No one knew he was with her, and no one seemed to care. By the time he left, the reality of being awake for the last 40 hours caught up with her. She collapsed on her bed and slept until something woke her up at 2 a.m. Although she was tired, she had to take another look at the Cole interview. She wrote notes to herself about what a loose cannon he was. A true religious fanatic, droning on and on about his end-of-the-world bullshit. But there was something about the way he connected the dots of corruption in Washington that was compelling. From the top-level executives of corporations like the New World Alliance to the leaders in Congress, they were all curiously involved. There was no way around it. This was a major story. She had to lay in her bed and watch the 90-minute video one more time before falling asleep. This would be the biggest story in decades, and it was all hers. The interview was a real rat's nest. He was all over the place, as he clearly had a lot to get off his chest. She would ask him a direct question, something about specific high-level involvement. He'd start out being very clear and revealing, and then he'd go off on some philosophical or spiritual non sequitur that appeared to make no sense. She knew this piece would be an editing nightmare. There was just no way the network would be able to air it by 9 a.m. like they wanted to. There is no straight line, Gloria. Momentum propels, but gravity repels, he said more than once. What exactly do you mean by that, Max? She queried. What we think of as a straight line is nothing more than just a human construct, something we've created to try and make sense of the world around us. We use lines to build our homes and sketch our ideas. We even draw a line on a piece of paper with arrows on both ends and a point in the middle, and we call it time. But we got it all wrong. There is no straight line, not in nature or anywhere else in creation. So why do we put so much trust in what we call a timeline? There's always some point on the line, a point we call the present. But every time we look at that point, it's moving. This doesn't make sense. That point shouldn't be moving along a static line. The present moment, our present, is what's really static. It's eternal. We are always in the present. It's the future that moves into our eternal present moment. Likewise, the past rolls up like film in one of those old movie projectors. It's there for us to revisit, and so we do, usually much more than we should. Yes, that makes sense, she offered, trying to get him back on track. All this crap's gotta go, she told herself. But now, lying in her bed, she felt the need, for some strange reason, to watch that part over and over. But she was once again falling asleep, and everything started to blend into the dream world. Gloria found herself in a reoccurring dream, once again in her childhood backyard back in Springfield, Illinois. It was a good place, a safe place, full of good memories of playing with real and imaginary friends, a place where she could take refuge in the midst of the stormy vicissitudes between her alcoholic father and her overbearing mother. In this particular dream, her dad was gone and never to return. Mom, not being able to keep up with the bills, was forced to sell the house. Usually that backyard and house was a part of happy dreams, but not this time. There they were, saying goodbye to the only home she'd ever known. She took one last glimpse as the car pulled away. Her mother reached into the back seat and grabbed her leg as she continued to cry uncontrollably and told her, "Don't worry, Gloria, everything's gonna be all right. The voice was her mother's, but the strength and certainty was from somewhere else. It was more than a voice, it was a force, a presence that somehow chased away the fear and pain, even if for just a moment. And even though the realities of their financial plight would soon return, she could not ignore the power in those words. A welter of barking dogs and distant sirens jarred her from her slumbers. Gloria lifted her head, thinking she heard something unusual. It was a very low and subtle humming sound. The first thing that came to her mind was to check on her son, Michael, his room just across the hall. But then she remembered he was spending the night at his friend's house. She stepped out into the hardwood corridor and moved cautiously, but quickening her pace with each stride until she reached the foyer. By that point, the hum was like a freight train idling on the other side of the front door. She saw light filtering through the front window. It was 5:32 a.m. as she carefully opened the lock. She peeked out and felt the oppressive heat and humidity of that June morning. The air was still. Not a single leaf stirred along the row of red maple trees flanking her perfectly manicured stone walkway. The entire sky loomed pale crimson, like a massive suspended blanket about to fall. The sun's golden reddish hue spilled through the open door and onto her white leather sofa. For a moment, it felt as if time had ceased. Except for that hum, now growing louder and sounding more like 1,000 brass instruments blowing one single note. It caused the concrete beneath her feet to vibrate. It started to rattle the window panes in her door. It shook her brain, but it wasn't an earthquake. The ground resonated more than it shook. But why was it happening? What caused it? No one seemed to know. Neighbors filtered into the street, searching for an answer, for a way to turn it off, some way to escape it. Then, out of nowhere, shafts of light started shooting into the sky. With eyes shielded by upraised arms, Gloria recoiled back into the middle of her room, stumbling over the coffee table and tumbling to the floor. She quickly rebounded, ignoring the slight sprain to her wrist, and immediately tried to call her son. But she couldn't get through. The bandwidths were instantly clogged with calls of disoriented people just like her trying to reach loved ones. "Damn," she muttered. "It must be true. It must be true. That crazy bastard. How could he know this?" Gloria leaned against the end of her couch and for a second was speechless and amazed that Cole knew all this was going to happen. She turned on the 3D. Special reports revealed disturbing images of human beings vaporizing into flashes of light and the utter mayhem that followed. The menacing trumpet blast had ceased, now replaced by the torrent of sirens, alarms, and panic screams. There he was, Bill Hortung, standing in front of the Capitol building, reporting how staff members and maintenance personnel working in the early morning were being evacuated. They were running from the building as fast as they could. Bill's eyes were wide and full of fear, yet his voice remained calm and steady as he did his best to report his story with the mettle of a professional news reporter. Gloria shook her head as her news chops kicked in as well. After all, Hortung was her news rival. She couldn't let him take center stage. Nor would she spend another moment staring like a spectator watching a special news report. Not now, not knowing what she knew. It was time to get to work. After all, she was Gloria Fiveland, esteemed journalist and reporter, the first one to break the recent story of corruption in the Department of Advanced Technologies and their ties to the New World Alliance. The Cole interview was securely stored in the memory bank of her wrist phone, but it was still unedited. It was up to her to bring it to the world. After quickly throwing on some clothes, Gloria left her house. That was when Michael's call came through. "Mom, what's happening?" "I'm not sure, Michael. Are you okay? Are you still at Warren's?" Yeah, I'm fine. Mom, there's people just disappearing. What the? I know. I'm headed down to the office right now. You just stay where you're at until I know more. Just stay inside, okay? Promise me, Michael. But Mom, Michael, listen to me. I don't know if it's safe to go out yet. But what about you? Look, I'll be fine. Just stay inside, she snapped, ending their call abruptly. Gloria made a few more quick calls before getting to the network building. She was there within 30 minutes. Jerry met her as soon as the elevator doors opened on the 15th floor. His big, round, olive skin face was sweaty. His dark brown hair was matted and disheveled from one too many upward and backward wipes from his nervous hand. The blue silk tie given to him by his new wife, now pulled into a tight strand of stressed fabric, hung loosely around his open white collar. "Gloria, where is that video with Cole? The one you told me about last night. Does that have anything to do with what's happening?" "I need to work on it, Jerry. It's about 90 minutes long and he was all over the place. But I know there's a connection somehow. I've got it all right here," she told him, pointing to her wrist phone. "I'm going to work on it right now." "Just send it over to editing, Gloria. We don't have time for that." "No way, Jerry," she snapped. "It's my feed and I'll give it to you as soon as I can." Jerry Merlo, her boss, was upset but too busy to fight with her. "Hurry up," he quipped. "I got a car coming in an hour to take you to the White House. The president's giving a press conference at 9. Then, landing a quick laser stare, he added, "And don't miss it." Suddenly, his head snapped around as someone else pulled his arm, vying for his attention. Gloria ran down the hall to her office, past a gauntlet of crazed co-workers trying to find out what she knew. Many had already witnessed firsthand the vanishing of close family and friends. Others were just plain in shock. Quickly, she pushed open her office door and locked herself in. Breathing a heavy sigh of relief, she stood motionless with her forehead resting just next to the wall switch. She kept her eyes closed for a minute, trying to slow down her breathing and regain her composure. 1,000 thoughts and yet 1,000 more questions sped through her mind like a whirling dust cloud. The room seemed eerily quiet, in contrast to the disturbing scene just outside the door, now faintly audible. And with every passing second, the sounds of that busy office continued to recede, as if her room was speeding away from them. It was dark in there. Gloria turned around slowly. The light-canceling blinds were drawn shut, allowing only the faintest glimmer to outline familiar silhouettes of her feng shui decor. But for the moment, she was paralyzed, unable to move a muscle as she embraced the darkness in an instinctive attempt to make sense of that strange quietness. Within 15 seconds, the noise outside the door was completely gone. All she could hear was the sound of her own exaggerated breathing. Fear suddenly gripped her. She sensed she was not alone. From the corner of her eye, something moved behind her desk. Slowly, she reached behind her back for the doorknob, grabbed it firmly, and prepared to leave the room when a voice suddenly called out to her. "Gloria," said an unfamiliar voice. She jumped to turn and feverishly pulled on the doorknob, but it wouldn't budge. "Help! Help!" she screamed. "No one outside that door can hear you right now,"